Do Arsenal need to win the UEFA Champions League to salvage their season? I mean, they've been making history in the process, Kweku. This is not a competition Arsenal have ever won before. They came through Real Madrid with great ease, 5-1 on aggregate. I don't think many people saw that coming. But here they are now in the semi-finals against a very good PSG side that have impressed. How do you see this tie going in terms of the zoomed out view on it?
I think that Arsenal need to just focus in on winning the Champions League in isolation and not look at the ramifications for what it means for this season. You qualified for Champions League already. You finish in second, you finish in third, finish in fourth. It's the same thing. I know that bragging rights in terms of other football fans. You don't want to not finish second, but it's now just zooming in on winning the Champions League, which you've never won before. The only other final you made was in 2006. Again, very unfortunate in that final, the red card that shouldn't have been, and then the 2 late goals from Barcelona. But this is your best opportunity since then. This is such a great opportunity. I know PSG are the informed side in Europe, haven't lost a game yet in Ligue 1, and in recent rounds in the Champions League have looked very, very good. But Arsenal played against PSG in the group stages and just looked better than them at everything. And that's what Arsenal have done in the Champions League. Against most sides, looked better than them at everything. And that's without a striker. And so I look at this Arsenal side, and from my Chelsea fan point of view, I'm worried. I'm very, very, very worried. Because you look at the constitution of teams that win the Champions League, apart from if you're a Barcelona circa '09 or circa 2011, or a City that won it in 23 playing good football, the Champions League is about taking your moments, and for some reason, this Arsenal team, when the moment has called, they've answered that bell, and I just think that's going to continue in the semi-final. I think that PSG are looking at this saying we would have rather taken on somebody else. I think this Arsenal team are set up perfectly to at least make the Champions League final.
I mean, we've said it all season, really, that Arsenal are better suited to the Champions League than they are to the Premier League. And you saw that against Real Madrid, the way that they just shut out anything that Real Madrid could possibly do. Real Madrid didn't even look like themselves whatsoever in that game, and that is down to the hard work that Arsenal have done. Taking a bigger lens out, I think it doesn't matter whether they win the Champions League this year or not. I know I've said a lot of things about Arsenal on this show. Lots of it's been clipped up and I've had lots of comments, but there has objectively been a lot of progress under Mikel Arteta, and every season there's been progress.
I thought you were going to say something else there. I got to admit, I thought you were going to say something else.
No, going to the Bernabeu and winning 2-1 and winning 5-1 over 2 legs against Real Madrid in the Champions League is almost unheard of. Hardly anyone does that, and that is basically without a striker and without your best 11, and he's done an incredibly good job. And I just look at this game and I see massive similarities with it, to be honest. I think if it was, let's say, Arsenal coming up against Inter Milan, from someone who doesn't want Arsenal to win the Champions League, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with that. But you're coming up against a team who can basically only attack, and their attack is unbelievable, but Arsenal's defence and quelling of attacks is second best, is the best in the whole of Europe. So I just think that we saw what happened to PSG against Villa. When they are under pressure, which Arsenal will put on at the right moment, at the right time, Arsenal will put under that pressure, and they buckled every single time against Aston Villa. And if Arsenal, who have such a good defence, can keep out that front three, or at least frustrate them, particularly in the first leg, they've got a very, very good chance.
The hope is, from an Arsenal perspective, that they got all their mistakes out of their system in midweek against Crystal Palace, because Arsenal weren't very good against the Eagles, and I think it was quite obvious, actually, that they are very much focused on this competition, and that the Premier League at the minute, and as Kweku said, I'd love them to finish second, but if they finished third or fourth and went an extra round in the Champions League, who really cares in the grand scheme of things? I think they are distracted, though. And I kind of look at that on the one hand and say, well, you shouldn't be. You're professionals and you should be able to manage those situations and those circumstances. But there's another part of me that says, well, if that means you're going to be right bang up for it come Tuesday night against PSG, then that's fine. And go on.
So I'm not sure that's how it works. I understand what you're trying to say. I'm just not sure that's how it works. And I think about that Manchester City treble season, where basically every single game in every competition for the last 20 to 25 games, they had to win. And I think that's why they went on to win the treble. I think if they didn't have to win the Premier League until the last minute, they wouldn't have. And I do worry when a team rests on their laurels midweek or rests on their laurels at the weekend and then has to go massive midweek. It seems to be like a little bit of a shift in tone. And if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd want to see Arsenal blowing Crystal Palace away. I'd want to see them at their absolute best going into this game, because sometimes that little shift is hard to then take that next step up. I don't know.
I'd agree with you generally, but then they had that Everton game then they thrashed Real Madrid in midweek. Then they drew at home to Brentford, but they were still able to turn it on against Madrid again in the second leg. So I feel like under normal circumstances, or in that example that you gave around Manchester City, where there is something to play for, yes, the continuity needs to be there. But in this case, it just feels like Arsenal have completely checked out of the Premier League.
I agree, and let's not forget, on the weekend you did blow away Ipswich, and so like it's. I would agree with you if Arsenal still had other competitions to play for, but having seen my team be in the situation where it's like the league doesn't matter, those players can get up for the Champions League. And in terms of the progress that you mentioned that Arsenal have shown, I think it's so evident in the Champions League because obviously it's a cup competition. But last year, going out against Bayern Munich, what happened in the first leg? You missed loads of chances. And then you should have been out clear of Bayern Munich. And obviously they had that wiliness, that nous, obviously got back into the game. And in the second leg, it's tough to go to their place and get a win. We saw in the first leg against Real Madrid, you took your chances. As well as you played, it was like you scored 2 set-piece goals and the Mikel Moreno's goal was unbelievable. And in the Bernabeu, you're not going to go there and blow Real Madrid away, but you took your chances. And I think that's what Arsenal need to do in this game against PSG, take your chances, because despite the fact that on paper, you look at, I think anyway, you look at Vinicius, Mbappe and Rodrigo as better players than Doué, Kvaratskhelia and Dembele, this PSG team will create more chances than that Real Madrid team. And so I do think they will score. You will have to make sure that you score and take your opportunities. But like I said, I think it's just fallen perfectly. I think you probably have a worse chance if Kai Havertz is playing up front than Mikel Moreno. And you mentioned this to me, and I thought it was a great observation. If Arsenal would have signed a striker in January for 60 million and they gave you the exact same output and the same goals Mikel Moreno has given you since January, you'd say, great signing. Mikel Arteta deserves a lot of credit, and I think in the Champions League, the way that he's so detailed, orientated to the minutiae, sets you up perfectly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's had to think outside the box at times this season to deal with some injury issues, and there have been decisions taken that have, led to a lot of Arsenal fans going, well, I'm not sure about that. But in the end, everything he does seems to come good in the end. I think tactically, though, this is a fascinating game for me because Arsenal, they quite like playing teams that are going to come onto them. You've mentioned that PSG love to attack, and they will do exactly that. But Arsenal don't sink in these situations. They don't sit on the edge of their box and try and absorb. What they do is they kind of set up with like a mid-block, and they say, come on then, we'll press you when we think it's right, but we're also not going to overcommit, and you're going to have to play through us rather than over the top of us or around us. I thought one of the things they did great against Real Madrid was they were well aware of the threat in behind of Mbappe, of Vinicius, of Rodrigo, of Bellingham making those runs from deep. And they said, we'll push up to a certain degree, but the spaces that we leave in behind, they got to be manageable spaces. Spaces that our sweeper keeper can come out and deal with if you do manage to play over the top of us. And I think a lot of those same principles are going to have to be applied against this PSG side. I actually think their midfield is probably a little bit more technical than Arsenal's because obviously Thomas Partey will miss the first leg through suspension. Jorginho's out by the looks of it. So it looks like Marino's going to have to drop into midfield, maybe Trossard up front. And that's if Marino's even fit because he wasn't available against Crystal Palace. So I think where Arsenal can take control of this tie is physically. They've got to overpower this PSG side, in my opinion.
I think the difficulty when you're coming up against this PSG side is basically when they're in possession, it's a front six. And it's a front six who are all incredibly technical. And you look at that front three, you look at Doué, Dembele and Kvaratskhelia. As Kweku said, they're probably not as good players as your Mbappe, Vinicius and Rodrigo. But what they are is way more unpredictable. They can take it on the inside, they can take it on the outside. You have no idea what they're going to do. They're all incredibly comfortable on the ball, and they've all got really fantastic shots, and they aren't afraid to let one go at long range. And I think that's the difficulty here, is that you can set up really well, like you did against Real Madrid. But I would argue that Real Madrid are more predictable and therefore easier to defend against than this front three of players who Doué has only just come in. There's only so much learning you can do about him. Kvaratskhelia is one of the most exciting wingers. And Ousmane Dembele doesn't even know which is his favourite foot. So you're coming up against a really unpredictable side who've got such good quality behind them. I think it might even be a case of it doesn't matter how well you set up against them. You've just got to hope that they don't take their chances because they will get them.
And this is where I think that Arteta's coaching comes to the fore to combat that. For the longest time, and I've been critical of Martinelli, he doesn't give me enough, he's not consistent enough. But what he is really good at is going that way. And so Bukayo Saka has been bred into them from a young age. Arteta, their manager, and they're going to need that because not only are PSG's wide men dangerous, the fullbacks are arguably the two best attacking fullbacks in the world in Nuno Mendes and Hakimi. So I think that Saka and Martinelli will be asked to do a lot going backwards, but they are ready for this occasion. They are built for this occasion. I think that's why a lot of football fans look at this Arsenal team as being built for the Champions League. You've got the experience under your belt. You've got the quality players. I know that you would want to be at full strength. Partey misses a huge loss. But you've got enough, and I think the PSG, they've rode their luck coming to England, right? They won a penalty shootout against Liverpool. They were the better side over those 2 games. They beat Aston Villa, they got through against Aston Villa, but that second leg could have gone another way. They play another English side in the semi-final. I think this is where their luck runs out against an Arsenal side who are one of the best teams in the world.
It's going to be fascinating to see how this goes because I think there's so many interesting facets to it. You guys mentioned the PSG attackers. I feel like they're a bit of a throwback. They're kind of mavericks. You give them the ball, you've got the structure behind them, and you say to them, go and play and be unpredictable. And they're allowed to do that. Lots is made of the fullback threat that they have. And I think this is where you can see the contrast in the styles between the two teams because Hakimi loves to bomb down the right-hand side. Mendes loves to bomb down the left. Hasn't always been the case, though, at PSG. He has at times been a bit more reserved. But Arsenal, on the other hand, have got 2 very good defensive fullbacks. And so yes, PSG are going to come at them, but I feel like Arsenal are almost built to deal with most of the problems that PSG pose. And so if Arsenal can take their moments and lean on that solidity and that shape that they have, then, they've got a really, really good chance. But I can't wait to see how this one pans out, honestly. I think it's going to be
such a good game.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Should we do some predictions? I'll let you guys start because mine's going to be with the heart.
For what it's worth, I think Arsenal need to win the game at the Emirates. I think it's going to be really, really difficult to go to Paris if they're already down or on a draw because PSG are really sensational. I think it's going to be 1-1. I do think it's going to be 1-1. I think Arsenal are going to have a lot of... They're going to be able to quell a lot of PSG's attack. But I just think that those little individual moments of brilliance are going to hurt them.
Yeah, I agree. I think Arsenal win, but it doesn't go the way that Mikel Arteta wants. I think Arteta will want this game to be slowed down, be methodical. But I think this is a shootout in the first leg, and I think it's 3-2 to Arsenal. You take a slender league to Paris.
I'm going to go with the famous old 1-0 to the Arsenal. I think it's going to be cagier than people expect because I think when you get to this stage of the competition and so much is at stake, sometimes what you've seen in the lead up can just go out the window. And I think often the nerves can get the better of you. For PSG, obviously, they're going to win the league, but they win the league every year. It's all about the Champions League for them. For Arsenal, it is very much about the Champions League, and that's the one chance to kind of make history, but at the same time salvage what's been a disappointing season. So I think it'll be cagey. I think Arsenal nick a goal from a set piece, and we go back to Paris for the second leg and see how it goes. Let us know how you guys think it's going to go in the comments section. This promises to be some tie.